Most people hear French Riviera and think millionaires, yachts, and property prices that make absolutely no sense. So explain this. For around $100,000, you can still buy property on the south coast of France, not hours away from the action, not in a village with one cafe and a seasonal bus, in a city of 900,000 people with a metro, an international airport, one of the great ports of the Mediterranean, and a food culture that has been quietly embarrassing its neighbors for 200 years. And one of the properties in this video has a detail hidden inside its ownership structure that completely changes how you think about its price. Keep that in mind, because the first property costs less than many new cars. It's a 36 square meter apartment in the first arrondissement of Marseille, the historic heart of the city, for 85,000 euros. I went through hundreds of listings across the Côte d'Azur and the Var Coast to find properties with realistic prices, clear structures, and features worth actually discussing. Not ruins, not great potential, not things I'd be embarrassed to show a friend. These are the ones that made the cut at the time of this roundup. That 85,000 euros, roughly 99,000 US dollars, is for a T1 bis apartment on the second floor of a 4-apartment building at 2 Rue des Ouards, in the first arrondissement of Marseille. Second floor of 3, no elevator. Let me tell you what that means before I tell you what you get. The first arrondissement is not a quiet suburb. It is the oldest part of one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in France. The Vieux-Port is walking distance. The Marché des Capucins, one of the most genuinely alive food markets in the country, is walking distance. The city's main train station, Gare Saint-Charles, is walking distance. You are buying a foothold in the geographic and historical center of a major Mediterranean city for less than $100,000. That is the context. Now the apartment itself, 36 square meters, which is about 388 square feet. Living room with open kitchen, separate WC, a sleeping area with a closet. The bis in T1 bis means it functions as a one-bedroom rather than a pure studio, because the sleeping zone is genuinely distinct from the living space. Bathroom. The building has 4 apartments across 3 floors. Small, intimate, and very quiet from a co-ownership perspective. 4-lot condominiums tend to be considerably more straightforward to manage than 100-unit blocks. The honest note, and I'm going to say this plainly because this is the kind of thing that saves you from a mistake, is that the listing states the apartment requires daily updates to be rented in good conditions. That is the agent's way of saying renovation needed. This is not a move-and-ready property. You are buying something that needs work before it performs. The listing also flags an upcoming facade renovation for the building, which means an additional charge will arrive at some point. Property tax is 700 euros per year. Monthly charges are 67 euros, which covers cold water, building insurance, and management fees. And I'll note that 67 euros a month for all of that is, by French condominium standards, remarkably low. The deal kicker is the location. Full stop. The kitchen, and I know kitchens matter, needs updating, but you are standing in the first arrondissement of Marseille. At 85,000 euros, the renovation budget required to bring this to rental-ready condition is baked into the gap between what you're paying and what a turnkey apartment in this postcode would cost. Budget, 30 to 40,000 euros for a proper refurbishment, and you've still spent well under 140,000 US dollars for a legitimate income-generating apartment in one of France's 5 largest cities. That's the maths. Whether the maths works for you depends entirely on what you're trying to do, but the underlying asset is real. There's a property later in this video where the ownership structure will make you stop and read it twice. Keep watching. Now, this next one I almost led with differently, because the honest thing about it is this: you will never sleep here, not even once. 89,000 euros, just over 103,000 US dollars. A fully furnished 1-bedroom apartment, 34 square meters, or 366 square feet, plus an 8 square meter balcony on the French Riviera, 400 meters from a beach, Plage de l'Argentière, between Hyères and Saint-Tropez. The residence includes an outdoor swimming pool, sauna, hammam, and fitness area. A parking space is included. The property was built in 2012. Here's the thing that changes what this listing actually is. There's a lease agreement with the operator already in place, running until October 2032. Your tenant is the Odalis Group, one of the larger French holiday residence operators. Annual rent, 5,625 euros. Annual charges, 460 euros. Property tax, 508 euros. That's an annual net income, after charges and tax, of around 4,657 euros, roughly a 5.2% yield on the purchase price. You are buying a Riviera investment, not a Riviera home. If that's what you want, a managed, hands-off return with a professional operator in a quality-built building. This is cleanly structured and honest about what it is. The listing doesn't pretend otherwise. The compromise is real and worth naming. No personal use during the lease term. No spontaneous weekends in Provence. No, I'll pop down in August. The building does offer amenities, typically reserved for guest experience, the pool, the hammam, but whether you can access them as the owner during the lease period is worth confirming directly before any offer. The location, though, the Londe-les-Maures, Var Coast, motorway access, airport, and TGV, about 20 kilometers away. This is not rural compromise territory. This is genuinely mid-Riviera. So here's what I want to say after these first two, because I think it matters. You've just seen two properties under 90,000 euros on the south coast of France. One is a renovation project in the historic heart of Marseille, a city asset in a major urban market. The other is a quietly managed investment on the Var Coast that pays you while you wait. Neither of these is a conventional apartment you walk into with a suitcase and immediately call home, but both are real. Both exist. France is not closed. The question is what you actually want from it. Here's what daily life looks like from this part of the Var Coast. The Var department sits in the crook between Marseille and the Italian border. It's the Riviera before it became a brand, vineyards and cork oak, and a coastline that still has working fishing ports on it. La Londe-les-Maures is a real town. Supermarkets, a market, a pharmacy, restaurants that don't price gouge tourists. Toulon is about 30 minutes east by car, and that's where you'll find the main hospital, the TGV, the airport, the Ile d'Or, Porquerolles, Port-Cros are accessible by ferry from nearby La Tour Fondue or Le Lavandou, 40 minutes on a slow day. Internet in the urban parts of the Var Coast is increasingly fiber connected. More rural spots rely on ADSL or Starlink. Drive inland 5 minutes from any beach road here and you're in scrubland and mimosa that smells extraordinary in February. That's the life. Here's the thing nobody puts in especially for apartments in French city centers or tourist residences, notaire fees in France typically run 7 to 8% of the purchase price for older properties, and even for newer resale apartments. You should budget a minimum of 3 to 4%. On an 85 or 89,000 euro purchase, that's roughly 3,000 to 7,000 euros in fees alone, on top of the price. Those fees are paid at the time of signing. They are not optional, and if you're a non-EU buyer, there are no restrictions on purchasing property in France. But you will want a French notaire, ideally one who speaks your language, or an independent translator at the closing table. Ask your agent for a full fee breakdown before you make any offer. That one question will tell you immediately how transparent they're prepared to be. And this is exactly the kind of thing I want you to check before you fall in love with a house. That's why I created The Real Cost of Buying a Cheap House in Europe, a complete 180-page guide to help you understand what you're really paying before you make an offer. If you're serious about buying in Europe, this guide could save you thousands by helping you avoid the wrong property and the hidden costs most buyers miss. You can get it through the link in the description or just scan the QR code on screen. Don't buy the dream blind. Third property, Fréjus, historic center, 90,000 euros, approximately 105,000 US dollars. Fréjus sits on the eastern edge of the Var, where the red rocks of the Estoril Mountains meet the coast, and the Romans, evidently, decided to stay. It has a full-scale amphitheater, a working aqueduct, and a cathedral that dates to the 5th century, all of which you can reach on foot from the center of town. The climate is genuinely mild year-round. The old town is compact and walkable, and unlike its flashier neighbors to the west, Fréjus feels like a place people actually live in rather than perform living in. It sits close enough to Saint-Raphael that you get access to a mainline TGV station without paying Saint-Raphael prices. Now Fréjus has Roman ruins in its literal streets. The old town is the kind of place where a medieval gate is just part of the commute. And this apartment, 31.23 square meters carrés, which is 336 square feet, with a mezzanine bringing total floor area to 43.62 square meters, 470 square feet, and a ceiling height of 3.4 meters, is exactly the kind of property that photographs mediocre and lives beautifully. You walk in through an entrance hall, large living room with a kitchenette area. The mezzanine above has space for 2 sleeping spots, which means this functions, practically, as a 1-bedroom with space to host. The bathroom includes a toilet, plus a storage area above it, which sounds odd but actually makes sense at this ceiling height. The apartment faces west. Quiet surroundings. The honest note, finishes are described as to be completed. That phrase in a French listing can mean paint touch-ups or it can mean a project. The listing also says good overall condition for floors, walls, and double glazing, which is where the money actually is. And that phrasing, at this price in Fréjus, generally means what it says. But I would not assume finishes to be completed cost nothing without a quote. Co-ownership of 5 lots, annual charges of €500, parking nearby, subscription or casual. The deal kicker is the ceiling height. In a studio or small apartment, 3.4 meters of height is the difference between a cupboard and a space you want to be in. And the best part is that figure doesn't show up in the price. €90,000 for something that would photograph like a loft conversion in any other city. Now let me say something that changes how I've been framing this. We keep talking about investment yield and renovation budgets, but step back for a moment. Fréjus has a TGV connection. Marseille has a major international airport. The Var coast has beaches that consistently rank among the cleanest in France. At these prices, you are not buying compromise. You are buying a decision about what kind of life you want to build. The spreadsheet matters, but so does the view from the terrace on a Tuesday in March. Property 4, La Riviera, Bormes-les-Mimosas, €94,000 to around $109,000. Bormes-les-Mimosas is one of those Var villages that earns its reputation without trying very hard. A medieval hilltop town draped in bougainvillea and mimosa with La Riviera as its beach annex down below. The coastline here is quieter than Saint-Tropez and considerably less performative about it. The Île d'Or sit on the horizon on clear days. The light in the afternoon is the kind that makes even a car park look painterly. And the whole microregion has the feeling of a place that hasn't quite been discovered at scale yet. The winters are short, the summers are long, and the hiking trails into the Massif des Maures start almost from the edge of town. This one had a price reduction. That detail in a listing either means the seller is motivated or the property sat. I think it's the former here because the location is too strong for the latter. La Riviera is a small beach community. You are genuinely steps from the sand. The property is a studio with a sleeping alcove, 17.46 square meters, about 188 square feet, plus an enclosed loggia of 5.68 square meters, 61 square feet on the first floor of a gated residence, west-facing, natural light, kitchenette, shower room, WC, private parking within the residence. The compromise is stated openly. Some minor renovations needed. I actually appreciate that the listing says this plainly. It means either the agent is honest or the vendor is. In either case, at this price in this location, minor renovations in a beachside studio probably means flooring, paint, possibly a fixture or two. Budget 10 to 15,000 euros to bring it to the condition you actually want, and you've still spent well under $125,000 for a Riviera beach property. The sleeping alcove means this isn't a flat share situation. It's designed as a one-person or couples retreat. Virtual tour available on request, which I'd strongly recommend before traveling. Property 5, Mandelieu-la-Napoule, €95,000, roughly $110,000. Mandelieu-la-Napoule sits between Cannes and the red cliffs of the Esterel Massif on a stretch of coastline that manages to feel both genuinely residential and genuinely close to everything. The town has a proper marina, a medieval chateau that juts out over the sea, mimosa festivals in February that draw people in from across the region, and the kind of infrastructure, shops, schools, transport links that suggests people actually live here rather than just visit. The A8 motorway is minutes away. Cannes city center is a 12-minute drive. It is, in the bluntest possible terms, Cannes adjacent without the Cannes price tag. And in property terms, that gap is currently very wide, 5 minutes from the beaches of La Napoule. This is a different flavor of investment property from number 2, because here you actually get to use it. Furnished holiday residence, managed professionally, with a minimum guaranteed net rent of €5,752 per year, excluding taxes. Rental lease running on a 369 furnished lease structure until March 31st, 2030. And here's the clause that makes this interesting. You retain the right to use the property for 2 weeks per year. 1 week in mid-season, outside peak summer and the Cannes Film Festival, and 1 week in low season, parking space included. 167 lot condominium. Estimated annual charges, €1,197. The honest read, this is not a holiday home with a side income. It is a managed investment with a holiday perk. 5 minutes from La Napoule's beaches near Cannes. The location is serious. The yield at €5,752 on €95,000 is around 6% gross, above the tourist apartment in property 2, but you're in a larger condominium, and the lease runs to 2030, which means limited flexibility for the next several years. If you want a Riviera foothold with structured returns, and you can live with 2 weeks a year rather than full access, this is among the cleanest structures in this roundup. Property 6, La Favière, but this one's different. 100,000 euros, 116,000 US dollars. 600 meters from La Favière Beach, completely renovated, south facing, which on the Var coast means sun almost all day. Reversible air conditioning installed. Sold fully furnished, currently tenanted on a furnished lease, with a vacancy date of December 13th, 2026, which means that if you want to use it yourself, that option is a defined date, not a hypothetical. This property sits at the intersection of two things that rarely align: truly move-in ready condition and a clear exit from the tenancy. The renovation is described as complete, which at this price on this coastline, compared to what we've seen so far, represents a meaningful premium. You are not buying potential here. You are buying done. The location is Le Lavandou and Bormes-les-Mimosas territory, and I want to say something about that micro-region. It is genuinely one of the most under-discussed stretches of the Riviera. The Ile d'Or ferries leave from here. The beaches, Saint-Clair, La Fossette, Aiguebelle, are some of the cleanest in France. The A57 motorway puts Toulon Airport within 20 kilometers. Solid properties, and I use that phrase deliberately, are rare below 6 figures in this postcode. At 100,000 euros, renovated, furnished, south-facing, steps from the coast, this is the closest thing to a no-caveat property in this video. And the best part is, it also gives you the most flexibility. Use it, rent it. The choice doesn't close until December 2026. Final property, and this is where I have to come back to something I planted at the start. 105,000 euros, 122,000 US dollars. Fréjus Historic Center, ground floor of a village house. 27.54 square meters, 296 square feet, completely renovated. Fitted kitchen, sleeping alcove, shower room with WC, no work expected, no co-ownership charges, and a 16 square meter basement storage room. That's 172 square feet of actual usable storage space, which in a 27 square meter apartment is not a footnote. That's a bicycle, a suitcase collection, skis, seasonal furniture, or a workspace if you're creative about it. I said at the beginning that one of these properties had a detail hidden inside its ownership structure that changes how you think about its price. This is it. Not the structure of this particular property, but the contrast it creates with everything else. This studio is the simplest purchase in this entire video. No managed lease, no operator agreement, no renovation budget required, no facade assessment pending, no ongoing payment structure to decode, no co-ownership charges. You buy it, it's yours, it's done. All city center amenities within walking distance, parking available nearby, and you start from a completely clean slate. Think about the Marseille apartment that opened this video. 85,000 euros in the first arrondissement of one of France's great cities, but renovation needed, facade work coming, a project to manage. Think about the investment apartments, professionally structured, yields documented, but no personal use for years. Now look at this, 105,000 euros. Fréjus Historic Center, done. Simple, yours. It's not the most dramatic property on this list. It doesn't have a pool or a guaranteed yield or a balcony over the Mediterranean. What it has is simplicity, complete, unencumbered simplicity. And when you've spent time staring at renovation budgets and lease agreements running to 2032, simplicity on the south coast of France for 105,000 euros starts to look like its own kind of extraordinary. So here is how I'd sort this list. If you want the purest Riviera investment, managed, hands-off, highest yield, no personal use required, the Mandelieu property at 95,000 euros is the most professionally structured option in this roundup. If you want something you can actually step into yourself, the La Favière studio at 100,000 euros is the standout. Renovated, furnished, south-facing, and with a clear date when it becomes fully yours. If you are a buyer who understands renovation projects and wants a foothold in a major French city with genuine long-term upside, the Marseille apartment at 85,000 euros in the first arrondissement is an asset. It just requires work and patience. And if you want the cleanest, simplest purchase with no complexity and no ongoing surprises, the Fréjus studio at 105,000 euros is exactly that. The honest verdict over coffee. The south coast of France is not the closed door people assume it is. It's complicated. The structures are real. The fees are real. The renovation realities are real. And I'd be doing you a disservice if I pretended otherwise. But below $100,000 across one of the most desirable coastlines in Europe, there are actual properties, not ruins, not fantasies, solid properties, most of them small, some of them requiring work, all of them real. And that matters. I'm Curious what you'd actually do here? Leave a comment. Would you take the Marseille renovation project and build something in a major city? Or would you pay the premium for something already done on the Var coast? That answer tells you more about your strategy than any price comparison. If you want to see what the same money buys in Portugal or along the Spanish Costa Brava, that's the next video. And subscribing is the only way to know when it lands.